shall I send? And who will go for us?
Then said I, here am I, send me. And he said,
Go! And you tell this people, hear ye indeed,
but understand not, and see ye indeed, but perceive not. Make the heart.
Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing in 1 Corinthians, we're in chapter 4. And we're in the first verse. Let a man so account of us as of the ministers of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Referring to the previous passage, remember, he had said, all things belong to you. That you don't have to glory in men, or you ought not to glory in men, whether you be of Paul or of Apollos, because through God's Spirit, all those things belong to you. You know, the Reformation of Luther belongs to me. The magisterium of the Catholic Church belongs to me. Everything belongs to me because I belong to Christ. It belongs to me. And so the individual human beings are of no account. There's no need to glory in them. You know, we talk about standing on, I have a great admiration for the having the guts to stand up and nail the 95 Theses to the Wittenberg Tor, as Luther did. I have a great deal of respect for that. But yet, that was the moving of the Spirit, and so he ought not to be thought beyond his station, because it wasn't Luther, but God that moved Luther. And ultimately, the works are the works of God. And if they are of God, then they're God's works and not the works of men. And so he's saying, when you take account of us, think of us as the ministers of Christ. Think of us as the stewards of the mystery of God. We have a responsibility. We have a stewardship over God's mysteries. And mysteries, mysterion, it's not like the way we think of the word mystery, like something you have to figure out. But very often they're the things which are hid from the natural man, but they are revealed to us through Christ. So, one of the mysteries is, Christ in the church, and then just the spiritual relationship of a bridegroom and his bride. It's not that you can't understand it. It's just that the mystery is revealed, and that is one of the ways that relationship is characterized. So, let's continue. Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. But with me it is a very small thing that I should be judged of you, or of man's judgment. Yea, I judge not my own self. For I know nothing by myself, yet I am not hereby justified. I'm not justified by the fact that I don't know anything of myself. But he that judgeth me is the Lord. So he's saying, stewards have to be found faithful. It is required. You don't put someone in charge of a responsibility such as a steward might have. A lot of the names of royal families include this, like in Scotland, include names like Stuart, or you remember Princess Diana, who died years back, but her family name was Spencer, which is short for dispenser. And oftentimes the stewards were so worthy and so important that they became admitted into the royal household, that they became seen as suitable marriage partners. And so stewards often became, so you have someone who is a Spencer becoming a duchess, or Stuart becoming king. In fact, King James was King James Stewart. That's one of my family names. I don't know that every Stewart is related to the same Stewarts, but they were all in some way stewards, or stewards, depending on, I think it depends on whether you're Scottish or English or whatever. They were all in some way playing that role, just like Smith. The name Stewart refers to someone who is in that role. They've been given a charge of some responsibility. So, if a man is to be found faithful enough to even ascend to being the king, though they are not descended from the king, in a sense, they make a better king because they've risen because of competence. They've risen because, this guy's in charge of all my house, and I have no heir. Why don't we just make his son king or make him king? And that's how those families came to be in power. It was through being appointed to power, because they were faithful stewards of their master's things, whether it be lands, goods, or whatever. Well, he that is steward over God's house is steward of the things of the Lord. And that is primarily the teachings of Christ. One must be faithful in executing the dispensary of those things, of teaching them, of preaching them. A man must be faithful to them and in them. And so he is not only to be faithful in words, but also in his deeds. He has to set a good example. It can't be found that a steward wastes his master's goods. One of my favorite parables is the parable of the unjust steward who wasted his master's goods. That's in Luke 16. And I like it so much because it is because Jesus says things, I guess you could say, somewhat ironically, which a lot of people don't think Jesus would do. But that's the only way to interpret that passage without engaging in without being unfaithful to the truth, ultimately. Make you friends of the mammon of unrighteousness? Does that sound like the type of thing Jesus would suggest you do? Rip off your boss so that the world may receive you. When your boss is God? No, you must be found faithful. He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in that which is greatest. It's a very easy. When I was a teenager, one of my first jobs was working at Friendship Village, which was a chain of nursing homes and assisted living facilities, and also just kind of retirement community. It's not just I worked in the assisted living facility, and in the kitchen, I was like a server, busboy, general helper, and as far as dinner time. It was a great job back then. It was like $6.11 an hour to work in the assisted living section, and that was really great pay for, if you remember, when minimum wage was like $4.10 or something like that. This is back in 1990 or 89. I forgot. It was 90 because I was 15. When I was 15, it was 1989. It might have been 88. Might have started at 88. I remember as soon as I turned 15, I got that job. So that would be December 88. So I was probably hired in December of 88. Anyways, that was pretty good pay. And I don't know why I'm talking about that aspect. But I used to work there and in the kitchen. And, the easiest thing in the world was to just steal, I guess. We never thought of it as stealing, like as far as like take a piece of cake, right? We had these, we'd have a dessert. One of my responsibilities was to prepare dessert. So we'd get the menu, and if it was German chocolate cake or carrot cake, whatever it was, I'd go into the freezer, and they had these pre-made frozen cakes. And we would cut them up and put them on little dishes and put the dishes on trays. Whatever the dessert happened to be, we would make a certain number of them and put them on trays and put them on our cart to bring up to the assisted living facility, where they had like the little heater trays and the refrigerator and a little microwave for doing all the little things up there. But everything was brought up from the kitchen in the elevator. And just taking a piece of cake, or there was all kinds of stuff in that freezer. And we were allowed to make plates of food. So there wasn't like a clear line. I mean, we were able to eat. We were allowed to eat because there was always extra sent up after the residents had their fill and they were done. There was always leftovers, and they were to be thrown away, or we could eat them. We often did, but I mean, it went beyond that sometimes. Sometimes I took things that I probably wasn't supposed to take. I mean, nothing big. Piece of cake, something like that. And those are the least things. And sometimes you could say, well, people who take the least, I mean, they're not likely necessarily to steal more. That's true. It doesn't necessarily because you'd be willing to like, in fact, there's a word for it in the scriptures called purloining. It means to steal from your employer, because there's a sort of it needs a special word, because it's not, because you have control over it, you have stewardship over it, so it's easy. And there's, sometimes it feels like a bit of a gray area, because sometimes you're allowed, like I remember I worked at Subway, and I was allowed a 6-inch. But sometimes I put like triple meat on. I remember my boss didn't like that when she found it. She said, you better eat that. So it wasn't exactly breaking the rules, but it was like, I put on maximum vegetables and stuff like that. So there was a gray area. But what about someone who never breaks those rules? Someone who never would take an extra piece of cake. Someone who would never touch anything that didn't belong to them. That person is truly faithful. Because if someone's faithful to the point where they don't do even the least, they ought to be faithful even in the greatest. Now, that only goes so far, because immediately comes to mind what Jesus said about the scribes and Pharisees, doesn't it? Doesn't it come to mind what he said? And what was it he said? What are you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites? For you tithe of the mint and the anise and cumin, and have neglected the matters, judgment, mercy, and faith. Now, I don't think they neglected to tithe the greater things either. I mean, they tithe everything down to the mint. They're very good about the tithe. So you could still say that they were faithful in the least. They were also faithful in that which is much. But they didn't understand what that problem was. Mostly they didn't understand what they needed to be faithful in, what was most important. And that the tithe, though a small thing, sometimes if it's a different thing, we'll be faithful to some things that are easy and not to things that are hard. So the principle doesn't apply necessarily when you cross the characteristics of the things you need to be faithful in. Sometimes you might be faithful in little things because it's easy, and not faithful in big things because it's hard. But in those big things that are hard, you may find that it's difficult to be faithful even in the least. It's not just a question of, when it comes to judgment, mercy, and faith, for example, with the scribes and Pharisees, they were not only not faithful in the greater matters of judgment, mercy, and faith, they were not faithful in the least matters of judgment, mercy, and faith. If you think about things like mercy and faith, like it is at the small end, you often encounter opportunities of mercy or to be faithful in which you may betray those things. So it is, depending on the characteristic of the thing, the faithfulness can waver. Okay, back to what Paul was saying. But with me, it is a very small thing that I should be judged of you. It's no big deal for me to be judged by you or of man's judgment at all. He's saying, I don't even judge myself. And this is an attitude I try to take because I don't even know what I'm becoming. I don't even know what the Lord is making me into. I don't even know what the Lord has in store for me in the next day. So judging me now is very, it's something we shouldn't engage in. Because being harshly critical of ourselves in the present is not being mindful of that which the Lord has ordained for the future. Because He has ordained something for you. He has ordained your future, and it's going to be a certain way, and you don't even know what it's going to be. And so we could look at trials we're going through right now, and if we were to judge them, it'd be like we were looking at it as though it was the end of the journey, when it may really just be the beginning of something, or in the middle phase. And you may have a lot more coming along in your life that's going to take the things that now are and use them and mold them into something better. Steel is made, iron is made strong and into steel by things which you might consider to be impurities. Carbon. Carbon isn't something that would necessarily strike you as like, hey, if we add carbon to iron, it'll strengthen it. It won't be so brittle. And I think, I don't know if that's all they add, but I know carbon is one of the main things that is added to iron to make it into steel. Carbon steel. And so, adding this black, I think they call it coke, a certain kind of coal, to the molten, iron. You can see why steel, it didn't just come up. There was a lot of experimentation that had to be done for people to figure out how to make steel. And something stronger than, to make, because iron was strong, but to make it into something truly strong, into steel, something less brittle, that is a significant accomplishment. And so also, we may have works of iron, things that are strong but fragile, can be shattered. And then going through the crucible of the trials we go through in life, going through difficulties, works in us things that we don't always perceive. And so, the sufferings and even the sins you may struggle with, like the emotional pain you may go through or the turmoil of spirit, often works things that you can't even see yet. So judging yourself is not really the the path forward. As far as condemn, when I talk about judging here, I do think he means, in a sense, condemn or to find fault with. At least, I mean in the sense of faithfulness. Because I know people who are very strong believers, right? And they find themselves in one particular area or another falling short frequently. And they may even take that as like, well, that's a measure of me. I'm not faithful to Christ because I haven't obeyed him to the utmost. I haven't been able to, excuse me, I haven't been able to obey Christ in every aspect of my life. And I need to bring, every thought and every passion into subjection to Christ. And I haven't accomplished that. And then they would judge themselves unfaithful. And that's not necessarily the right judgment. It's not necessarily the right thing to say you're unfaithful just because you're not fully fitted out. There is something lacking, because it is very frequent that we lack things. There we are not fully obedient because we are not fully equipped. And I need only look at the example of the apostles, such as like Peter denying Christ 3 times, Thomas doubting, saying, until I put my fingers in his wounds, I will not believe. Those examples of them behaving in a way that you could characterize as somewhat foolish and faithless. Not keeping faith. Oh, Lord, I'll go with you even to death. And then I don't even know him. That's humiliating. That's a humiliating breach of faith. And it would be not out of the realm of reasonable thought to think Peter went out and wept bitterly. He felt he had breached faith with Christ. He hadn't abandoned his faith, but he had not stood up to the danger. And so there's all kinds of ways in which we might fail to stand up to the challenges of our lives. And so, being found faithful, what do you steward over? The things, because like I say, what is your life characterized by? If you're a steward of the gospel, have you been faithful to the gospel? Have you been preaching corrupted gospels? And if you were made aware of such a thing, did you change it? Did you amend did you correct yourself? Have you been given children? Have you been faithful in your parenting to do the Lord's will concerning your children? Or have you neglected your duties? And, there are different ways in which we can find ourselves either faithful or falling short. But even so, he's saying it is a small thing to be judged of you, at Corinth, or of any man's judgment. And he's saying, or even of myself, because I don't even know. I don't know what I'm looking at right now. It's like when Peter, the Lord had said, he that denies me before men will I deny before my Father and before the angels. But Peter was forgiven, and that scripture will not be, that judgment's not going to come down on Peter. He will not be denied before the angels, before his Father. He's not condemned. I've committed enough sins in my life to be condemned 1,000-fold. I certainly deserve to be condemned as unworthy of eternal life, as unworthy of God's kingdom. I'm not worthy of God's kingdom. But the truth is that no one is. No one is worthy of God's kingdom, and no one can enter into it except by the blood of Christ. And since we all are entering through grace, we, judging things before the time, as he says here, therefore judge nothing before the time until the Lord come, who will both bring to light the hidden things of darkness and will make manifest the counsels of the hearts. And then shall every man have praise of God. There's no point in exalting men, or rather of being too harsh on yourself even, or being harsh towards, we should not be overly harsh to people based on their failings. There are certainly traitorous deeds, unrepented of, which we cannot tolerate in our midst. Paul had certain people teaching heresies whom he said, I have delivered unto Satan that they may learn not to blaspheme. And there's certain things, there are certain degrees of fornication committed in the midst of the body of the church which are unacceptable. That you cannot, he's like, I heard there's fornication among you, such as not named among the Gentiles. Even the Gentiles are ashamed of this misbehavior. In that case, it was that a man should have his father's wife, his stepmother. And they're walking into church, we love the Lord together. No, there's some degrees of immorality which are just not, no, you can't do that. You will not just proudly parade in here. That is not negotiable. There are some levels of error, unrepented of. Because like I said, there's a lot of things that men will do which they regret and repent and say, I reject these deeds. And that is a different story. But to come proudly parading into the midst of the church, basically trying to deny your sin. And so that's one thing. When we talk about the hidden things of darkness, bringing to light the hidden things of darkness, there are things hidden in darkness that we don't know about. And this gets into things, I've been where some people, they really want to judge people's motives. Like why they say something that is perceived as a slight. And then they want to get into, well, what did they mean by that? What was their intention? And that's not right. I can't, I remember arguing with someone about this once. It's like, I can't judge someone's motives. I don't know what moves them to do things. Just because they do something, like, so if someone kills someone, do I know why necessarily? Just because of meaning based on the naked fact that they killed, well, they must have been hate. It must have, could not have been, someone can do murder from love. I'm not saying it justifies, but in the sense of like, there are other things that you could say that was more characterized by their love or their hate or whatever. Maybe that's not a great example because there's a lot of hatred in murder. I mean, angry with, as Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, that starts with anger and despising your brother, and it leads to killing. So, pardon me. So I don't know, that's maybe not the greatest example, but certainly, when you get involved in churches and with groups of people, there's always this intrigue between people. They have relationships. Some people don't naturally get along necessarily as well, and there's intrigue and feelings of like offense taken, offense given, and very often we don't know why. There's another place where Paul says, some preach Christ of contention and strife, and some preach Christ of genuine of a genuine desire to preach the gospel of sincerity and truth. And he says, I just rejoice that Christ is preached. And the reason he felt that way is because there's nothing that will not be revealed in the end. Meaning, when God comes and judges everything, all the fakes are going to be exposed. I mean? I don't need to expose them now. I should give heed. I mean, like I said, someone who is well hidden is not a concern. It really isn't. I've always, I've told people in my family, there's certain family members that extended family, where I'm like, I don't know if they hate me, and I don't really care, because they never say anything about it. They never say how they feel. And if they don't say how they feel, if it's all hidden in darkness, if they're just greeting me with a smiling face, if I don't sense they're actively trying to sabotage me, I don't much care what they feel. You know what I mean? Especially if they're not even talking to other people. If they're not gossiping. I mean, if they're neither gossiping nor bringing it to my attention, they can hate my guts if they want to. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care what you think of me. I don't care what your real thoughts are. Don't care in the least. Because it's like, that I will trust to Christ. I will trust Christ to rebuke that. I don't need to correct your misapprehension of the truth. That's not my responsibility. And so also, like, it'd be different if people, if people are confronting you with things. Well, then now you have to deal with it. If they're coming and they're saying, hey, this is how I feel, you said something that offended me. Now you have something to talk about and reconcile over and perhaps dispute over, or somehow find a way to find peace. But the hidden things of darkness are hidden, and only God knows what's hidden in the hearts of men. I don't know what's hidden in the hearts of men. I don't even really know what's hidden in my heart. You ever do things, and as a kid I remember, why'd you do that? I don't know. I don't know why I did that. I don't know. I just was there, and suddenly it occurred to me to do something, and so I did it. Like, why is too complicated for me to understand. It's too hidden in the darkness of my mind. The workings of your own mind are somewhat, if you don't find them at least a little mysterious, I don't know, then congratulations. But I do. I do. I find the workings of my mind mysterious. Sometimes I don't know why I think things. I don't know why I feel a certain way. Sometimes I wish I could control that. I wish I could take hold of that and just dial it into what I want to feel like this about this thing. I don't want to feel offended. I don't want to feel pained. I don't want to rejoice, let's say. Something I shouldn't rejoice at. I don't want to rejoice at this. I don't think I should feel pleasure like at someone's pain, for example, I wish I could just control that dial just with my intellect. God will make manifest the counsels of the heart, bring to light the hidden things of darkness. This is what God does. This is when he comes. When Jesus comes, this is what he's going to do. The word's going to come out of his mouth. The light's going to shine forth, and all the things that are hidden in darkness are going to be revealed. All the counsels which are kept secret are going to be laid bare and open. For all things are naked and open before him with whom we have to do. They're all just naked and open to him already, and he will expose them for all to see. And then shall every man have praise of God, or condemnation. And that's the thing, is that in the meantime, people are always jockeying for praise. Like, you have a ministry like this, it's like, is it important that it be recognized by who? You know what I mean? Like, who needs to recognize my ministry? What, like some denomination? I don't even acknowledge I don't even respect that power. Why would I want the powers that be to acknowledge my ministry? You know what I mean? I don't need it. It's like the powers that be are not the powers that truly are. It's like, I am a power that is. You know what I mean? Like this is where God's power is being invested in my life, in your life. And therefore, and even that, I don't care what the people who listen to me's judgment is. I mean, I probably care more, right? I mean, I by nature, but it's like, in the spirit, I ought not, because judge nothing before the time, till the Lord come. He's going to have, if somebody says like, well, I don't think Paul was sincere, or I don't think I don't think he knows what he's talking about. Well, that's fine. It's like, ultimately, to the degree which I fail or succeed, the Lord's going to reveal it. Say, look at all the things he had wrong, and this is all he had right, and this is how much praise I will give him. This is what he was faithful to. He was faithful in so much. And I'll have praise for what I really deserve to be praised in of God. People will sometimes say nice things, which I have mixed feelings about, because sometimes to me it's like I feel conflict. I'll get a nice letter from someone and just saying a lot of nice things, and it makes me feel, if nothing else, a little uncomfortable, because I suddenly feel a sense of responsibility to them. But thankfully, the Lord doesn't allow me to really hang on to that too much, because I don't take their praise overly seriously, and it's not over effusive. I don't get too I don't have weird people who listen to me for the most part. They're very normal. So I don't get weird letters full of bizarre claims and exaltations and stuff. I don't get that. But even so, the nice things people say cause me to feel a great sense of that responsibility that's laid on me. People are listening, and they are judging it well. Therefore, as they feel that I am trustworthy as a faithful steward of God, when I say things that are a little further maybe than is conventionally said. Like where I push beyond maybe a boundary that conventionality says you should sort of remain back here. This is where conventional wisdom of Christianity is, and you're going beyond that, and it makes people uncomfortable. When I go there, it makes me feel this sense of, well, I have a great responsibility because people listen to what I say. And so, if anything, the praise makes me feel that greater weight, which I think is a good way to feel. Because it does not, what it does is, I like it. I think I feel blessed of God, because when people praise me, the most dangerous thing when people praise you is that you would feel lifted up. And quite frankly, I feel the opposite, is praise weighs me down. Is that I feel then there is a lot more riding on me. When people say good things, I feel I'm carrying a heavier load than I realized. And that's not, it's not meant to dissuade people from saying things. I don't want Paul to feel weighed down. No, I think it's good to feel that. I think far too often our leaders don't feel the sense of responsibility they have. They've been given the keys to the kingdom. They went to seminary and now they have all the knowledge. And their knowledge is, at least all the knowledge they need, at least the knowledge they have is all the correct stuff that they should start with. And they go forth to become pastors and reverends and such. And they think, of course I'm going to do a good job. And they feel themselves exalted in what? In their success, and I suppose to some degree, the degree to which people are gathered together to them. I must be doing something right. Look at all the people that are listening, And and that's a very strong temptation to think that is it, and it is good to have people listen. I rejoice in the quality of the people that listen. It doesn't have to be a great number of people if it can be a people who are great in the Lord. And it doesn't matter, because I started off agreeing to do this for one person. For the sake of one person, I would continue to do this. So I only need one person to listen, and then I just keep going. That was where I set the bar, at one. So I don't need any more. I won't get to, as long as I have one person to study with me, I won't get discouraged. It doesn't matter, even if I feel like, well, barely anyone wants to listen. Well, barely anyone knows it exists. So, and that's not to say that there aren't people out there who, if they knew it existed, would want to listen. Of course there are. You know what I mean? But they don't know, so they don't. But that's fine, because all I need to keep going is one person to listen. And that's enough for me. And I set that as my threshold, because I do believe that it is worth it to take time in the scriptures to explain it to even one person. And that's how this always is going forward. It's that even for one person, it is important enough that each individual understand. Therefore, I will teach even if the number watching is only one. I won't bother if it's zero. I mean, I the Lord, as long as there's one, I did make it at least one. So I don't want to teach. I don't want to talk to nobody. Though sometimes I feel like maybe the one is just me. I'm teaching myself as much as I'm teaching anyone else. I'll tell you that. He manifests the hidden counsels of the hearts, and in that we can have praise. We can find out what's really going on. Like, why is Paul really doing his studies? Is it really for that one person, or is it all for the glory he gets? Is it really all for the glory of man? In the end, we'll find out. Until then, you would be wrong to judge me otherwise. And you'd be wrong to judge me whether... And remember, Paul's aspect here is thinking people judged worthy of praise. And so, if you're going to praise men, they got to be faithful. But he's saying, if people judge me and say I'm faithful, it's a small thing to me. I don't even judge myself faithful, because I don't even know the degree to which I am, ultimately. I'm trying to be faithful. to the revelation which God has given me. And when Christ appears, I just realized my thing is too narrow. There we go. Or too wide. Okay, all right, let's go on. And these things, brethren, have I in a figure transferred to myself and to Apollos for your sakes, that ye might learn in us not to think of men above that which is written, that no one of you be puffed up for one against the other. I always remember when I was in my early 20s and studying with people at that time who were also Shepherd's Chapel students, as I still do. I know a lot of people end up finding me because of Arnold Murray. And it's funny that I get the accusation that I've built my ministry piggybacking off of that. Arnold Murray belongs to me. I mean, all things belong to me. Luther belongs to me. Arnold Murray belongs to me. The Catholic Church belongs to me. All things are mine because I am Christ. And all those guys belong to me. True, false, in between. Ignorant, foolish, and wise, and full of knowledge. It's all mine. Whether they be rejected of God, whether they be of God, they all are. I don't have to look and say like, well, I have no. You know, I mean, like, I'm not built. You could say the same thing about anybody, that they're building their ministry on someone else's back. You know, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. We're all standing on the apostles and prophets, and you know, I mean, like, whose ministry isn't built on someone else's ministry? I mean, since Paul, who? Paul's the only one I know of who can claim that. Like, I mean, maybe there have been others, right? Who, I mean, I'm primarily self-taught, but I'm not 100% self-taught. Certainly the things here's the thing. I would say this to those who accuse me of such things. I didn't take Arnold Murray's teachings and use them to create my own ministry. There's other guys who do that. And those are the guys you all praise. You know what I mean? They just wholesale lift Arnold Murray's teachings and make them their own and regurgitate and repeat them. And they are praised. And all they're doing is building their ministry based on what Murray did. You don't even know if they're sincere. They just saw something that worked. I build my ministry on what I believe to be the truth. And that's why I don't have thousands of followers. You know what I mean? My teachings are not based on the teachings of Arnold Murray. The funny thing is I've had people who are like preterists. So you're still in Arnold Murray's teaching because you're a futurist. Arnold Murray didn't invent futurism. You know what I mean? That's like ridiculous. I was a futurist before I heard of Arnold Murray. You know, that means I look at prophecy, let's say well, see, I don't agree with, I would not agree with someone who characterized my futurism as thinking of prophecy as this forward-looking thing only. I certainly don't think of it as only looking forward. But like the beasts, they are full of eyes. You know what I mean? The prophecies are full of eyes. They look all around. The prophecies look not only to the future, but to the present and to the past. And they have an application in each and every place and time. There's something to be learned of the prophets and of the prophecies. So that's my view, but it could be categorized. I'm certainly not a preterist, you know, believing that the prophecies are mostly past and that are mostly fulfilled. You know, I definitely believe there is future fulfillment of prophecy that yet awaits, for sure. But when I was young and a student, I remember, you know, this passage was important to me because I was trying to tell other students, I'm like, don't think so much of Arnold Murray. Don't think of men above that which is written. But I had a friend who was fond of speculating beyond the scriptures. And this is the line of thinking that ultimately brought me out of Arnold Murray's circle of teachings, I guess you would call it. The word of men, I believe, and I always doubt my memory because, like, literally, this is something I don't think I've thought of in, at least since the last time I taught Corinthians, and I was thinking even longer than that. But the last time I taught Corinthians was like, what, 2009, 10, something like that? So it was like 10 years ago. A decade has gone by. That freaks me out a little bit. Like, I left Spirit of Truth Church a decade ago. A lot of time has gone by. And, you know, the funny thing is my Bible seems to have evaporated. It used to be. Oh, here it is, under these gloves. Under these gloves. I suppose, whatever. So I was thinking, if you look in your King James, will you see what I'm about to say? Yeah, of men is in italics. And in the King James Bible, of which this is a version, in the King James Bible, when you find words in italics, that means the translators supplied those words to keep the sense. Because in context, it makes sense. It's what Paul means. Not to think beyond that which is written. Above means beyond. To think above that which is written. And above, actually, here it would be better to trans beyond. Beyond that which is written, that you should think of men, you should not think. Right? And of men is correctly added there, in the sense of which Paul meant it. But also, I thought at the time, when I was in my early 20s, to me it was axiomatic. I took it as an axiom. Do not think beyond the Scriptures. I mean, do not think outside of what is written. And that's the type of belief I had back then, because like I said, it was, to me, my Christianity was this intellectual pursuit about only what the Bible said. But the thing is, I don't think that's sufficient anymore. I don't. I mean, the Bible is sufficient for a lot of things. I mean, we have enough Bible. We don't need more Bible. We've got plenty of Bible. Okay? We don't need more. We're cool. We're good. We're full up. I mean, Christians, we have the Bible, and Christians don't even know what the Bible says. So that's a problem. We already have a problem with more Scripture than people are able to engage with. There's just not enough engagement with the Bible among Christians, and I don't understand why. I guess somewhere deep down, I always had an intense curiosity about it, and so I can understand why people hate the Bible. I can understand why people love it, but I don't understand the apathy. I don't. That's hard for me to wrap my mind around, like having a nonchalant attitude towards it. That part is difficult for me. Because I can understand why you despise it, because there's some people who despise it, and they're non-believers, and it makes sense. They're like, do you see what it says in there? I was like, yeah, man, I did. It's like I said, like that study I did called, it went under the topical studies. Have you heard of Jesus, the pregnant woman killer? I mean, that's not exactly how the Bible portrays it, but I understood his point. Have you ever heard tell of such things? I mean, there's things in there. I don't understand the apathy among Christians, especially, except to somehow think that there's something lacking in their faith, like they're. If this is a robot, it's a robot. Hello. Yeah. I shouldn't have answered it, but then again, it would just keep ringing. All the robots, they never leave us alone, do they? I always thought it was funny in the movies, they'd have, what was that movie, AI? Was it AI? It was one of those movies where they had the future and the robots, and it was the near future where robots were kind of coming into their own. And they had these things called the flesh fairs, where they would have the robots bring them in. They would smash them, and the people who were real would like really enjoy it. Until they brought in this robot was too convincingly a little child. Yeah, he was too convincing, and the people didn't like it. They didn't want to see him smash because he was this little boy. He was a robot, but like he pleaded and was very convincing in terms of his artificial intelligence, and it disturbed people. He crossed the uncanny valley into what seemed real. He didn't seem like a robot. Obviously, he was an actor playing a little boy. There was no actual robot involved. But when I think of the actual robots, man, sign me up for the flesh fair. I want to crush them. I hate robots. I hate robocalls. I hate chatbots. I do. And I'm a programmer. So it's a funny thing. I do, but I hate them and their little algorithms calling me up. Leave me alone. I'm never going to be a big. I'm. I always thought it was funny. I was like, in the movie, it's like these are all like bad people. I'm like, I guess I'm one of those bad people. I don't like the robots. I'm not a big fan. So what I'm saying is like we need more than just, but the Bible, we need more than what's in here. And we need God's Spirit. I need to think about that. I know that's in the Bible, yes. But I mean, I need the things God's Spirit can reveal to me that I can't learn from the Bible. The Bible commands me to do things that I can't do without further knowledge. You know what I mean? There is a knowledge that passes understanding. You know what I mean? Like, I guess this is not more of muscle memory, they call it, like type thing. But like, when I learned to play the guitar correctly, it's from practice. And there's a knowledge that I obtain in Christ that through practicing righteousness, through practicing the things that the Scripture demands, if I practice those things, I gain the knowledge of them. And the Bible can't teach me that. It can encourage me to do it. It can tell me I ought to do it. But it cannot instruct me in the performing of righteousness. The Spirit of God in me will lead me in those things. He shall, if there was no need for such a thing, why would Jesus say that the Spirit of, when the Spirit of truth is come, he shall teach you all things and cause you to remember all the things that I've said to you, referring to the apostles also. Yes, he meant that, but he means it more than that. If there was no further need for understanding and knowledge, he wouldn't send his Spirit. And I'm not saying we need more doctrine or we need, we need new revelations of like, well, wait a second, it's not the Trinity, it's the quintity or some nonsense like that, which is not necessarily nonsense, but just something off the charts. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about the things that it just can't instruct us in. There are things we must experience, and we must be guided through them by the Spirit of God. So the Scripture there is knowledge, and there are things we need to think about that go beyond what is written. There's certain aspects of like how to raise your family, how to love your wife, that like the Bible doesn't explain everything in detail. We have enough Bible, but whatever is missing in that for us, the Spirit of God provides. And it is essential that we have the Spirit of God. And so Paul means here, not that you should never think beyond that which is written in the Bible, but I would say, when you start thinking beyond what is written, you ought to use caution and test whether the things you think are of God. Because many have been led astray, thinking like I'm following the Spirit, but they're following their own spirit. That goes back to the Old Testament. Woe to the foolish prophets which follow their own spirit and have seen nothing. Your prophets are like the foxes in the desert, sniffing around, sneaking around, sniffing around, looking for revelations that haven't come, seeking to be praised of men when they are not worthy of the praise that comes from God. So he's saying, I have in a figure transferred these things I'm talking about to me and Apollos. One saith, I am of Paul, and the other of Apollos. He's referring back to that. I've put us in the position so that you could look at us and say, by looking at us, you would learn not to think beyond that which is written. Because they were the primary. Paul, when he writes this letter, he's authoritative to the Corinthians. He's the one they're going to listen to. He was the primary apostle, the one who brought them the truth. So if someone's going to correct them, he is going to be heard. But he is also downplaying himself in the same degree to say, like, look at, don't claim to be of my faction against Apollos' faction. There is no mine against Apollos. You heard different things from us because we came to do different things. I came to plant, Apollo came to water. I think that's what he wanted to say. I almost just don't even want to start the next verse. It's one of my favorite verses. We're going to pick up with this verse next time because it's an important verse. And for whom maketh, but it goes with this. So let's just read it real quick, and then we're going to pick it up. We're going to pick up the thought, anyways, as we move forward tomorrow. For whom maketh thee to differ from another? And what hast thou that thou didst not receive? I quote this verse a lot. Now if thou didst receive it, why dost thou glory as if thou hadst not received it? I've talked about Apollos so you would learn not to think about men above that which is written, that none of you be puffed up for one against the other. Because that's the first thing that happens. We start feeling, like I said, people send me letters of praise. That could make me feel puffed up. Inflated, literally. In Greek, I believe the word means literally inflated. Like puffed means like, filled with, meaning you feel bigger. Because that which is puffed up is physically, appears larger. But it is no more massive, really. Air being pumped into something is negligible in terms of mass, as far as for practical human purposes. Though I know there is mass in the air. We have air, we have one atmosphere of pressure pushing down on everything. That's significant, right? But we're not talking about science, we're talking about spirit. And in the spirit, you understand that sometimes there's knowledge that puffs up. There is praise that puffs up. There is feeling of division that puffs up. It makes us feel like more than we are. That makes us appear larger than we are. Like TV pastors appear to be much bigger deal than they really are. Because they're on TV. Their image is inflated. Someone builds and it's funny because it's people follow it, and it's like it's self-perpetuating. What do I mean? Like if I got a loan and built a really big church with a fancy looking opening and stuff, and opened it up, people would show up. Maybe not enough to fill the place, but just because of the perceived size and scope and they say, well, there must be something going on here. I mean, I'm not saying that talent and charisma doesn't come into play, of which I might be lacking a great deal as far as making that kind of thing work. I mean, to make that kind of thing work, you have to have a certain spirit to bring all the people in. And a lot of church is basically a lot of the problem with church is that the focus is on filling those houses. And the success of a pastor is measured based on his ability to fill the house, or to build a bigger house and to fill it with more. And so as they build grander churches, more people just will show up. And maybe because they have the ability to build a grander church, they have also the ability to attract people, and when they come, to make them stay for whatever reasons. I don't know, because there's never been a big church I ever attended that I ever felt like staying in, so I don't know what the attraction is beyond like some obvious things. I mean, I can't judge the whole thing based on my impressions, but there is certainly the degree to which it feels like You feel like you belong to something big. That's important. Just a sense of belonging, like maybe they have great services and stuff, amenities. It depends on how important you think it is to be in church, even if there is no fellowship. Or, the degree to which you're willing to pursue fellowship, even in a big church, and use the system to find the support you need. Like, I've never been good at that sort of thing. So it's like, I would just show up and no one would talk to me and then I'd go my way. And that's something they all try to, they try to greet people who are new and get them involved in many of those places, but I always went through the cracks. And quite frankly, I was looking to slip through the cracks. I was just there to check things out. I'm not a big fan of giant churches because I don't have any. I just don't think that they accomplish what a church is ultimately supposed to be accomplished. They accomplish something, but it's not what the purpose of the church is. They accomplish a gathering together of the people, the building of a fine and grand ministry, but it's self-perpetuating in that as your ministry gets grander, more people come, it lends legitimacy to it. The message you preach that is holding people there attracts more and more of those kind of people. Just like those big stadium churches, how do they work? It must be along some, there's a huge stadium. Look, all the people are going. Let's go. Like guys like Joel Osteen, there's huge. So there's something about what he's preaching, something about it being big, being big. Like if I had millions of dollars, there's a possibility, especially if I earn that I could turn that into even more money. Because as you gather more resources, the tendency is for that to grow and grow and grow and grow. The more that is committed to you, the bigger the thing tends to get in any endeavor. Someone who successfully farms a bit of land may soon find themselves in the possession of even more land, especially if they're a truly successful farmer. I've seen that around me. There are certain farmers who really possess a large amount of land. And I live in an area where there are a lot of independent farmers. I'm not a farmer. So I program, I do other things. I'm a lot of things. But I don't farm. That's one thing I don't do. I have a garden, but not a farm. But they're all very independent individual farmers. It's not corporate farms out here. I mean, they may incorporate, but it's not like these big conglomerates. And you see that, and I see guys who, they have many fields and they buy more because the success breeds greater success, and they tend to consolidate and to continue in that way. And it works the same way in the church because it's being run more like a business than like something that's really meant to serve people. It serves people, but whether it serves Christ is an entirely different question. So, the puffed up churches puff up pastors, as far as I'm concerned. It makes people puff up one against another. Like, well, he's the greatest in the land. Look at all the people that come. Look at all the money that accrues. And so it is, but the day shall reveal the hidden things of darkness. As very often happens even in our day. A lot of these super guys turn out to be not so super. And, the same could be true of any one of us. But it is best we not be exalted beyond our measure, lest, a simple fall become a critical fall that causes a major rift or division in the body, We'll pick it up with verse 7 tomorrow. We have to, we're over. Okay. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords, and your pringlets into spears, let the weak say I am strong, assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about, till it cause thy mighty ones to come down.